overall consumers are just becoming more wise on, how important product quality is, not just in cannabis, but in many other products that are out there, right? Because wellness is becoming a more important factor. I think people are just, more educated and taking more ownership of their own health and their own wellness. And it is becoming definitely important. It becomes challenging from the perspective of when a customer wants to get more information on a product. We do know in Canada that the regulations are quite strict in that a product can only be released once it meets certain test criteria and specifications. So from a quality standpoint, the regulations are really set out to ensure product quality and safety, as long as you're buying legal product. Where quality starts to become an issue, or from the consumer's perspective, is when they're looking at things like package on date, right? Cannabis products don't necessarily have to go through stability studies. So in terms of shelf life, it's not really the same as it is for other food products, for example. So when you're looking at package on date, customers will say, okay, well, I know that this was packaged however many months ago. The OCS and other provincial bodies are becoming more strict on, what products they accept that fall within, acceptable range of freshness, for example. So that's kind of a way that's being managed from the quality perspective in that aspect. Going back to what you were talking a little bit before about the brands and what the brands can do, it is certainly challenging in our industry here because in the US, but also in Canada, because of the strict marketing and advertising and promotion regulations that really prevent brands from effectively marketing themselves, and they have to be very strategic in how they get to the consumer. And it becomes even more complex when there are brands that are not license holders and they're working with a licensed entity to either co-pack for them. And that's very, very common. Where you see brands, they're not the licensed entity, but they're working with a license holder and they're white labeling and have their brand. And from an ownership perspective, it's difficult for them to promote their own product outside of what the license holder is doing. I had a client this week that got a warning letter from Health Canada because they held events to help promote their brand. They, have a website, and Health Canada was like, hey, like, you're not supposed to do that. You're not a licensed entity, right? So that totally changes their business. And how did they get around that? And they were doing it from a perspective of, really not trying to be non-compliant. They're trying to educate the customer on the product, in parallel with the license holder. And they, but from Health Canada's perspective, they're saying, okay, well, this is misleading, right? So how can the brands work cohesively with the licensed entity and really come up with a strategy that can satisfy the regulations and also get to the customer? So there's always this constant balance. And the challenging thing too is that advertising, promotion, and marketing is in the regulations a bit of a gray area. You can interpret it differently depending on how you apply it and who's reading it. So a lot of companies don't think that they're being non-compliant, but Health Canada might have a different perspective. So that makes it really challenging. And I think the other thing I wanted to say about that is it seems like there's always a big focus on the existing customers and the existing consumers in the industry. When you're thinking about getting new customers, that's like a whole other complexity, because if you think about, maybe you don't drink alcohol, but everyone knows who Molson is, right? Or Budweiser, or you might not shop at Lululemon, but everyone knows who Lululemon is. It's not like that in cannabis. If you're not a cannabis consumer, how do you even know which brand to even go to? How do you even position your brand marketing to get new customers? Whether you're a brand yourself or you're a license holder or you're a retailer, it's very complex in that manner. So any technology or any other strategies, I'm not necessarily an expert in that. I'll leave it to the other folks on the panel, but yeah, I commend you for having a difficult job and trying to navigate that. Those are just some things to consider.